Watch this. Okay. This is my low right here. You've decided, this is a 5-minute chart. You've decided that this is the low right here at 2610, that where you think the market is going to bounce. So you do your analysis, and I'm just taking like a real obviously very hypothetical situation here. We do our analysis and we say to ourselves, okay, 2610 is where I think that we're going to get our bounce, and I'm going to buy it at 2610. Okay? So you do this. 2610. All right. 2610. All right. Now, you've identified that this is the high probability area that the market will bounce. Okay, but what happens is this. Oh man, it's going to go through there. I don't know. I'm kind of scared. I don't think I should trade it. So the probability continuum is at its highest for trade entry. Now price starts moving away. Probability continuum on the entry price shifts negatively, but your feeling, your little gut feel, or your emotional fluffy feelings start to feel good, because you say to yourself, hey, I picked the turning point, I picked the bottom, so you feel good. Okay? The probability for entry is shifting away, because the further price goes, the bigger your stop's going to be. Farther price now has to move to get your first profit level. Okay? You feel good because you're smart, because you were what? Right. You were right. Okay? You're like, okay, oh, maybe it is going to go down. No. Oh man, I cannot let everybody else make money and me not make money, because after all, I knew it was going to bounce at 20.0610. I knew it was going to bounce there, so they can't make money, me not, because I'm a good analyst. So I'm going to get in right now. Right now, I'm going to get in. And then this happens. Okay? So, maybe none of you can relate to this, but. But we had a 30 pip bounce there. I mean, this is just very hypothetical. I just want to draw an example. But and we see this in FX all the time, because that's how price moves, right? But it's about the probability continuum was at its maximum here for entry, but you're most scared, or highest level of anxiety about entering there. So as price moves away, the continuum shifts to the negative side, but you start feeling good. Okay? You see the relationship between price and emotion?
You just don't consider that it's going to reverse. You're so happy,
Okay, so the probability shifts are discrete and can leave you trapped in a narrow vision of past price action, while losses begin to add up. So now remember, there's certain times where the markets are just really, really trading friendly, and then they get into these grinds and they grind away your equity. Probability continuum is shifted a lot. Yeah, you're looking, you keep flipping on that equity, look at your equity, and like, oh wow, boy, I'm pretty good, Meanwhile, it's grinding away the positions. So shorter term, probability can shift very, very quickly, as we showed in that example. Probability can shift very quickly from your desired point of entry and tempt you into making a mistake, just as the example that I just showed. Okay? Assess probability based on rationale, not emotion. How price is actually doing. Okay? Time can be your friend if you're the patient type, or your enemy if you're impatient. Time is probably the single emotional grinder of all. Prior to or at the time you decide to take a trade, do not entertain a vision of how and when you see price moving from A to B. We talked about that earlier today. You decide to enter the market at X price. You have this vision as to if, when, and how price will arrive at B. Okay? First mistake, because now you've actually, in your mind, you've actually established a time frame, a parameter for price to move in time. So you've established this parameter about price, how often will price move in the timing that you've predetermined in your own mind. How often? Most of the time, never. Pretty much never. Okay? I mean, never is not a word that we like to use in trading. Always or never, we don't like to use those words. But in this case, we can probably use that word. Never and always are, terms that should not be in trading vocabulary at all. So never use the term never. But don't pre-establish a time and price move from A to B. Operate and manage your trade within the parameters of price in relation to your tools and what you understand about that market you're trading. Submit to and manage time within pre-established parameters of your trading plan and objectives. Okay, so we've defined our parameters, we've determined our entry points, and then we just now have to let price and time fight it out and determine whether or not we're going to stay in the trade, exit the trade, take a loss, or take profits or manage profits. Resolve yourself to the fact that price can and will move in both directions for any given length of time. So when we enter a trade, especially with position type trades, we can have a parameter, we enter the trade, price will just move around in its own timing. As long as the parameters are still in place, we have to let it be, let it take its time and move around. Be careful, don't focus in too much on the really small time frames because they can shake you out of positions if you're looking at longer term position trades. And just let price and time work itself out, because if the fundamental drivers are in place, like carry trade scenarios, some of the fundamental drivers we talked about last couple of days, if they're still in place and remain in place and your technical parameters are still supporting the trade, let time and price do its thing. Just sit back and watch and discern and then evaluate based on what it's doing. Okay? Time will grind on your emotions and tempt you into making decisions that you may later regret. Okay? Being right, ego. Being right is an error of permitting ego to interfere with rationale. So, once you have, let's say for example, I have a belief that a fundamental aspect is going to cause the market to go up. And I hold on to this belief so firmly that I reject all of the technical information of what price is actually doing, and I reject that. Then I'm allowing I probably told a few friends my opinions, and now once I tell my friends, I'm committing my ego to my position on that position, or my opinion, my position, or my commitment to that position, and now it's a matter of being right no matter what price does. And the ego is so powerful that if you tell a friend and you see a perfect setup in the opposite direction, you won't even take it, even though you could profit from it quite a bit. So you're actually willing to sacrifice profit or even take a loss for the matter of being right, because how that person or the persons you shared that information with, how they view you as a person, or as how they view you and your skill as a trader. Traders and investors tend to make choices that justify past decisions, even when circumstances change, like staying with a bad trade or asserting your belief on a position. What are the future risks and rewards to your circumstances now? So for example, let's say you've committed to a position is moving against you, You hold on to the position because, maybe you think that other people care about your position, people you communicated with care about your position. And to be honest with you, if you communicate with your position to other people, to be honest with you, they probably really don't even care until more, they'll probably forget all about it anyway. But you actually think they remember and do care, and so you stay in that position, it actually affects the outcome of your position. I'm going through this kind of quickly, but can you identify with some of these aspects? I don't know whether I'm just making up this stuff up or it just applies to
Be
me, or
neutral.
whether you actually can relate to it or not. I don't know. If you're operating within your equity management parameters, being right will not matter because the outcome is controlled and it won't affect your mental capital. As you all know, our equity can affect our mental capital, and our mental capital is more damaging than our equity, than our loss in equity. Because if you lose substantial equity, then you end up making just completely irrational decisions. When price action is contradicting your point of view, do not deny what price is telling you and respond by seeking supportive information. Supporting and non-supporting information will be present in some manner or some form at all times. And we talked about that earlier today. Okay? When you look at a chart, there will always be some aspect that supports your intention or rejects your intention. And even when you're in a trade, there will be some aspects that either support it and some aspects that don't support it. The idea is to go with the parameters that provide the most support for making your decision and managing your trade. If you know that, don't run around telling your pals about your trades. It moves ego into the subconscious, and actually they usually end up moving the opposite direction. Anyway, the law of whatever, the financial Murphy. Academics. I find this one interesting because I work with a lot of them. A lot of people I work with, and most people are way smarter than I am. So that's how I know about this. Some academics have a deeply rooted and fixed ego related to their intellectual proficiency that can be harmful when relating to financial markets. So, for example, you're an academic or an intellectual, and you are accustomed to, or you've grown up with this gift, this intellectual gift, and you have the ability to read and process information and piece things together, and throughout your life you've had the ability to read and comprehend information and to be able to engage in dialogue and typically be able to support your arguments or your discussions very well, which typically can give you a command over the other person, and you're accustomed to this when interacting with other human beings in social environment, non-social environments, and so forth. You're accustomed to being more right than wrong, and sometimes very, very right, and maybe like a 90%er in school, 95% or 100%er when it comes to quantitative type courses. But when you interact with the financial markets, whole new ballgame, whole new playing field. Now you have to adjust from that to the new playing field. And a lot of academics have great difficulty in making the transition from that to the playing field of sitting back and objectively and patiently watching the markets and just being able to define parameters to work within. Right? And you can have perfectly well-defined parameters to work within, but you still have to be careful of this desire to have an authority over this intangible, ungraspable object that can be very difficult. Now, on the other hand, you can use your academic proficiency to create processes and systems and facilities that can help you to take advantage of market movements. I love that as well. Like my former trading partner was a brilliant guy, but he not only had the quantitative proficiency, but he was also just very, very rational and very astute and very flexible and objective, and he was able to stick with a plan. So he used his academic proficiency very, very well when it came to meshing his abilities with that of the financial market. Academics find it more difficult to submit to the uncontrollable market environment because there's no absolute in determining outcome. Because an academic often will say, well, look, because A equals A plus B plus C plus D, I have all these things I expect to get such and such outcome because that's what they're accustomed to. Admission of being wrong is a good quality in trading, which can pose a challenge to an academic. Because when you go through your entire life not accustomed to being wrong very often, then that can pose a challenge. And you often see this with academics and relationships as well. Because you'd think somebody who's quite smart or quite astute would have the ability to understand how, maybe like how a woman works. And it's amazing how they can equally have as much difficulty as anyone else. So.
You're a pretty smart guy, to be honest.
Pardon me? I have a tough time with it myself. But so adjusting to the uncertainties of the ever-changing market environment will force a challenge on the psychological tenacity of the academic. And just the final aspect, which we're all familiar with. Greed moves in when you watch the growth of capital in your account without considering the larger picture and objective. Fear moves in when you have disregarded a good equity management plan and your trade is moving against you. Manage your positions properly and focus on the task, not the equity shifts and hopeful outcome. And that's it for that segment. I went kind of quickly through it, but that's it for trading psychology section. Any questions on that?
Yes, there is some contradiction. On one hand, you are saying you should not look at the equity. On the other hand, you have something in there saying 1.5% of the equity. Again, I want to ask one question about the equity. It all depends on your account size.
Yes.
1.5% for a person who has $100,000 in the account, means they can take more risk. And 1.5% a person who has only $10,000 in the trading account. This is a very different matter.
What exactly are you asking? Like, what exactly? What are you suggesting? So 1.5% is relative. 1.5% is 1.5% no matter how you look at it. So if you have $10,000 in your account, you're obviously trading you're trading the same risk. So one of the reasons why I put 1.5% is that is like a max total exposure that we would use, although a lot of our positions are within 1%. And even if you have $5 million, 1.5% can still represent a fair amount of capital. But it's all relative. One of the reasons also why I really harp on 1.5% is that I know that novice traders are going to go and take more risk, especially in FX. You see scores of articles written and so forth, and a common theme that risk 3 to 5%, and I just think that's too much. That is just, to me, that's too much. What if you take losses? When you take 10 losses in a row, you're risking 5% per trade, or 3% per trade. That's going to represent a pretty substantial drawdown when that happens. Whether it happens this year or in 8 years in your trading career, it's going to happen at some stage, and it has happened to me. I've had a bad string of losses, and sticking with the plan, because the 3 to 5% is going to draw on your mental capital. Okay, but if you still have preserved your mental capital, then after taking a big string of losses, I made up the losses in about 60 to 70% of the time it took to lose it. Okay, but what happens with a lot of novice traders is they go in there slinging away at 5% risk or more per trade, and then they take a number of losses. Their mental capital is fried, and then now they're like, can't get any worse, can't take any more losses. This one's got to go up, so they just ramp up the gearing even more because they want to make up what they lost, because they can't suffer any longer. They've sucked themselves dry of their mental capital, and they want to regain that mental capital by putting on heavier positions, higher risk positions, because after all, I can't take another loss, and then it just continually draws on on both their mental capital and their equity. So the 1.5% is, whether you're trading $50 million, either you can trade or you can't trade. Either you can trade or you can't, doesn't matter how much money you have in your account. You can trade or you can't, either you know. And even if you can trade, you're going to take a good string of losses. At some point, take a good string of losses. And the 1.5% will keep you in the game. If you kind of do the numbers on on how much the perceived draw on mental capital after a string of long losses, do the numbers on what your total loss would be on 1.5% versus say 5%, and just do an evaluation on what effect you think that might have on you psychologically. Right? Does that make sense at all, or? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps, but everyone has their own game.
Definitely makes sense, yeah.
So,
When you went through those 10 losses, I'm assuming you were fairly early in the game. I'm sure you.
not really. No, I was somewhat mature.
Okay, you went back and looked at it. Did you refine your trading plan after that, or it was you just attributed it to these were the ones that didn't work?
It's a good question. After I start taking a succession of losses, depending on the situation, I'll actually reduce my gearing and then start to build a base.
Right.
And you have to be careful, like Mark said earlier. He says you got to be careful, because once you start having all these successful trades, don't start gearing up right away, because when you start gearing up, you can start to take losses again. So you have to slowly build on it again and start gearing up again once you sort of get back into that rhythm. You don't want to go from gearing down, start building up your kind of your success rate and your capital again, and all of a sudden, boom, go back to full risk, and then take a loss, and then because that draws on your mental capital again. But again, also, I mean, I don't have a fixed risk parameter for trade, because it often will depend on the trade as well. I'll take higher risk trades, or I may be building into a position, so I'll start at very low risk and build into the position, things like that, right? So you have to be creative. I'd be very, very careful of being absolutely fixed in that type of thing, where you're just trading the same risk every single trade, right? Okay. All right. You guys ready for a nap or what? So we're going to have dinner, and then we'll come back here tonight and see if there's some jiggles